I also want to raise the issue of Palestine, and as well as echoing the comments about Ahmed Tamimi and just the horrendous treatment of a child, our mother, protesting against what is illegal, an immoral occupation of Palestinian territory in defiance of any notion of two-state solutions or international law. And yet we continue to allow Israel effectively to act with impunity. But I, in particular, want to talk about Gaza, the other part of Palestinian territory, and the shocking humanitarian crisis that is unfolding and worsening there. So often with Palestine, we only talk about it when there's war, when there's conflict, when places are being bombed to bits, and we talk little about what the disastrous humanitarian consequences are after, and the impact that the siege is having on nearly 2 million people in a tiny pocket of land in Gaza. The facts are really shocking. 20% of the housing stock destroyed in the various Israeli assaults, 1.3 million, 70% of the population dependent on humanitarian assistance. Nearly 50% of the population are food insecure, 55% of the population don't have consistent energy supply, less than 5% of the population have potable piped water, and we have a horrific situation in terms of patients trying to get out of Gaza to get medical treatment elsewhere, where the number that Israel is allowing out, or that Egypt, the Sisi regime, are allowing out, has been slashed. So that many people in desperate need of medical treatment simply cannot get out of Gaza. There's no medicine in the hospitals, there's no medical equipment in the hospitals, the amount of goods that can get in and out tightly controlled, and in particular impacting on medical stuff, because Israel claims it's dual usage and could be used as weapons and so on. Nonsense used to strangle the population into an appalling situation. Fishermen only allowed fish in a third of the fishing waters that they were supposed to be allowed to fish in under the Oslo Accords, and the world sits by and does nothing. And crucially, Minister, what I want to ask you is this. Simon Coveney went there last week. He met with Benjamin Netanyahu, the person who's defying international law, who's doing this, who's illegally occupying Israeli territory, who is in defiance of the the Geneva Convention in terms of the collective punishment of 2 million people in Gaza. Simon Coveney is happy to meet him. But when he goes to Gaza and does write a very moving blog about what he saw there, he refuses to meet the democratically elected members of the Gaza Parliament. Refuses to. And one line in his blog is to say, Hamas are deemed international terrorists, we don't deal directly with them. Now, by God, Benjamin Netanyahu, by any definition, is a terrorist in terms of what he's doing. We can meet him, no problem, but we go to Gaza and we will not meet with the democratically elected representatives of the people of Gaza. And let's remember, the reason Gaza is in the humanitarian mess it is in now is precisely because Israel refused to recognise the outcome of democratically elections over which there was international observation, and they were shown to be absolutely free and fair elections. But yet, when our minister goes over there, we refuse to talk to them. Now, I'm not even talking about talking to Hamas, and I want to pass on directly a request from the Gaza Parliament, because they have contacted me, and they've said they were delighted to see Simon Coveney in Gaza, but really wished representatives of this democratically elected Parliament would go and meet representatives of their democratically elected Parliament. Or maybe invite over the chair of the Speaker of the Gaza Parliament to this Parliament, to just talk to them. So we actually listen to what the elected representatives of the people of Gaza suffering this appalling situation actually have to say. Now that to me is elementary. If we could talk to Benjamin Netanyahu, and I'd rather we didn't, can we please talk to the people who represent the suffering millions in Gaza who are putting up with an appalling situation? So that's a direct question, Minister, to you and to the Government. Will you talk to the elected representatives of the people of Gaza about the disastrous humanitarian situation that the vast majority of that population are suffering? Minister, just really to follow up on the statement I made earlier on and the questions that I concluded with about Gaza. I know you discussed Jerusalem at the conference, at the Council, but I would like some response on the issue of Gaza. And I don't know if you can tell us much about what Minister Coveney did there last week. I know he met with some people, but they were linked to one faction, let's put it that way, the Ramallah-based government, and so they should. But there is a problem about not meeting the elected representatives from Gaza itself, because let's remember that is the trigger for the Israeli assaults. Israel didn't accept the outcome of a democratic election and then attacked. Simon Coveney last week saw some of the consequences, and he was clearly aware of them. But yet, he reinforces the Israeli position by not talking to the people who actually represent the people of Gaza. And that's what it's doing. It's legitimising Israel's position. And I don't think we should do that. At the very least, we should be balanced. I mean, there is now some reconciliation happening between the different factions, between Hamas and Fatah. So why don't we, or will we, because I've had a direct request from the Speaker of the elected representatives in the Gaza Parliament that we would send an all-party delegation to Gaza to meet their elected representatives in Gaza, or that we would invite the Speaker of the Gaza Parliament here. Right? And I think we should do that. If we're serious about actually talking to all sides, and they said to me, there is nothing that we could propose, because they said Ireland has incredible credibility with all Palestinian factions. They said there is nothing we could propose that they would not seriously consider. And that puts us in a very privileged position, because we have such credibility with Palestinians, but we should use that credibility to actually talk to the political representatives in Gaza, and I would ask you to seriously consider that, given the absolutely appalling humanitarian situation that exists, which is just intolerable. Particularly, I mean, some of the stuff they were telling me, and you look at the stats, you can see it, but just on anecdotal and individual evidence of people with really bad health conditions, kids and so on, in need of dialysis, in need of new kidneys and so on, and they can't get out to get the treatment. Apparently kidneys are being sold for 30 and 40,000 in Cairo, but you need 5,000 quid to bribe an Egyptian guard to get out through Rafah. That's the way it's working, right? And the number of people being allowed out for medical reasons has been massively reduced. We need to do something about this. We need to intervene, and we have a lot of credibility to do it. And I'm asking that we would use that credibility by engaging with the political representatives in Gaza. So I hope you would seriously consider that, Minister, and that the government would consider that, because that's straight from Gaza.